style. I float the Wainucci when it gets hot. I'm proud of all the things that I've got. I'm digging in moss bags up in the sand, and after work a cold beer in my hand, picking wild berries off God's land, and drinking my buddy's homemade wine. Living Northwest wild, hunting, fishing is my kind of style. I float the Wainucci when it gets hot. I'm proud of all the things that I've got. I'm digging in moss bags up in the sand, and after work a cold beer in my hand, picking wild berries off God's land, and drinking my buddy's homemade wine. In the Northwest wild.
Hey, good evening and welcome to FHN Northwest. Duane Inglin flying solo on tonight's live video production here in studio on our weekly Thursday night show. Thank you for joining us, typically joining me tonight. It is a bit odd to try and pull a show off by myself. Simply me, no co-host, no producer, gonna run it from the desk and try to get through this. But that being said, we do have a number of things to get through, a number of topics to discuss, and yes, it'll be somewhat of a condensed version of a show this evening. That being said, still have some really good content to bring to y'all. Wanted to try and at least get a show out there before the holidays with the lack of crew. So nonetheless, here we go. I want to remind everybody that FHN Northwest is presented by Better Homes and Gardens Pacific Commons Real Estate, located in Puyallup, Washington. Looking for homes and or have a home to sell, make sure you contact Joe Maxwell and the gang over there at Better Homes and Gardens in Puyallup. We appreciate you supporting businesses that support us. And of course, our good friends out there at Defiance Marine. Check everything out that they have going on at defiancemarine.com. Manufacturers of the Arima, the Defiance, and of course the Allied Series, the 21-foot Mustang, to be here soon, sometime after the first of the year, and can't wait for the unveiling of that. So with that, I want to get moving on through topics for tonight. Actually, before I do, I want to remind you all, hey, check out our webpage if you have not done so yet. www.fishhuntnw.com. Check out the blogs and the informational stuff that we have on there. Some of our videos links you to all of our social media. So from that one center location, you can find us here on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. All of it's linked there on our now newly released as a few weeks ago, our webpage. Check out our shop. Click the merch banner and hit the shop now. Shop here, and you're going to find a host of ideas and wares and other items that you can purchase for the holidays. Also, we have gift cards available, which makes Christmas shopping all that much easier. Find all that at fishhuntnw.com. Okay, moving on. It's the holiday season. It's unfortunately Rona season, and Josh is still recovering from some of his flu symptoms he has experienced for the past few weeks. Tommy has, in and around folks. Obviously, he works for Boeing, working from home mostly, but they are recording large numbers, as is everywhere. The spike is up, the testing is up, the numbers are up. We opted to just say it's going to be much safer for us to get through the holidays with family by keeping distance for the next few weeks. So that was what we decided to do. So tonight lends me to try to pull off a show by myself, and we'll see if we're successful or not. Okay, so moving ahead, it'll be myself for the next hour or so. Josh and Tommy will rejoin the crew here as we move into the new year. A lot of things happening in 2021 for Fish Hunt Northwest. We had planned to take the next couple weeks off as we roll into the holidays, because having a Thursday evening show, Christmas Eve is next week, New Year's Eve is the following week. We don't feel like there'd be a lot of participation, and there shouldn't be. It should be time for family and holidays and helping, let's bring a damn closure to 2020 and look forward to 2021 with a lot of excitement and anticipation of things to come. And that's kind of where we want to steer this thing. So we're going to get through tonight. I've lined up a great short show for us this evening to help you all out as we get into the front edge of our Steelhead season here. A little bit more on that in a minute. And, look forward to 2021. So we'll finish out tonight's show. We'll take a 2-week break. We will be relevant on social media via our Facebook page, some additional how-to stuff throughout the next couple weeks on our YouTube channel, and of course, Instagram and Twitter. So we'll continue to be relevant there and interactive. You can send us messages, questions. You can email us from our webpage. You can contact us in all sorts of ways. We get a lot of questions, and actually some of tonight's how-tos are based off of questions that you folks have been providing us and continue to ask. And I finally took time to dial in some of these how-tos to get them out there for you guys. So, okay, last Friday, as I go down my list here, so that's the status on FHN and the RONA and the flu and everything else going on, moving ahead. So going down the list here, last Friday, the 11th, December 11th, was an emergency commission, Fish and Wildlife Commission meeting to address the recent decision-making by WDFW as it relates to the current steelhead season that we are under and the rules that were implemented as of December 14th. The commission had an open Zoom forum meeting. They maxed out 515 plus 530, whatever their max number is for persons to log in and attend that meeting. It was maxed out. There were other persons that wanted to join in and couldn't because it was fully occupied. Highest viewed meeting WDFW has ever had, and for good reason. We have a lot of recreational anglers out there, and there were some commercial guys on there as well. Everybody's trying to weigh in and see what direction this thing's going to go or where it finally landed. The commission was more in a position to listen to persons' input than answer any questions. And the questions came up a few times as it relates to the current decision-making process by WDFW, where the season landed, and ultimately, hey, what are the co-managers doing? What kind of concessions are they taking? What is going to be their impact on mortality as it relates to wild steelhead moving forward? More so specific to the Quinault tribe here in the Chehalis Basin Grays Harbor region, okay? Some of the information for the Quileute tribe and other tribes, the Hoh tribe and whatnot out there on the North Coast have been presented or are out there for folks to find. So that question kind of lingers. Again, it was more of persons making statements, persons from small business. Obviously, a number of guides weighed in, guide associate members and presidents of different guides associations. I was intrigued by the amount of small business that weighed in because it is truly impacting small business out on the coast. That being said, we are in a condition of attempted recovery here. Our steelhead numbers are concerning, and this is something that didn't just show up, just the last couple weeks. This is something that's been building over time. And WDFW stated that they were working on this, the better part of this whole entire last year. But then again, they didn't bring out any information until the last hour, right up until right before the season officially was kind of kicking off. December 1st is ideally that target date that folks look at and go, hey, it's officially steelhead season. Not official, but that's kind of the general consensus. With that, WDFW started throwing the information out there that this change was coming about. A lot of folks, myself included, were asking why weren't these discussions happening back in September, or why after last year's abrupt closure did they not pull persons in from these guide associations and have those discussions early on? Hey, letting you guys know we're going to be in trouble next year. They may have voiced that, but I don't think they came out with hard facts that we're going to be looking at a full-on closure once again and or some serious concessions. It may affect your ability to book clients and provide access to persons on the water. We want to make this out there and aware for everybody as you start getting through the sportsman shows and other things as the year progresses and you begin, filling up your calendars. I just don't feel there was a a sense of urgency by WDFW to try and, I don't know, support small business and guides trying to earn their living. And other than it comes out way late in time, and they just kind of pull the rug out from everybody. So I just think more transparency, better communication. WDFW, I know you're trying. James Losey, whom I've known for a long time, is kind of spearheading this, came out with a lot of very factual and good information in the presentation. The presentation he provides for previously in the community meeting online, and then of course the commission meeting. You really can't dispute the numbers. I mean, I guess you could, but the numbers are pretty factual in their modeling, and there is concern. I just feel like there's a better avenue for communication, more transparency, as we all have to work collectively to rebound these fisheries. And it shouldn't always fall just on the onus of the recreational community, and especially the guides. I say recreational community because there's a lot of us out there that don't rely on guides, and we like to fish, and we should have access to these waters. But collectively, Guides Association, professional guides, recreational anglers, those that pursue these fish should have a voice. And it just seems more transparency, more communication would have been appreciated. So there is a commission meeting tomorrow on the schedule, on the agenda, the 18th. Chair Carpenter, Larry Carpenter, had mentioned in that meeting last Friday that he was looking forward to the 18th, in fact, that they may have some information or a decision. He alluded something to that. Didn't really come out and say they're going to do anything to change the decision or the season now that WDFW has landed on. He did make it a point to say maybe we'll come up with something on the 18th. I guess I interpret that as I looked at the agenda for tomorrow's meeting, there is nothing listed that reflects a review of the current steelhead season as it's been handed down. That's not to say they couldn't have an executive session. That's not to say they couldn't have just an open forum discussion and make a decision. It's not to say that they couldn't alter something in that plan. Chair Carpenter also made mention that his concern, quite frankly, was the lack of the ability to fish from a floating device. He was concerned about the inability of access for those who are handicapped and or those that just cannot walk around the riverbanks easily, and how this will minimize persons' access and ability to get through the season. So he did voice that concern, and I give him credit for that, because that is one that many have voiced their concerns on. ADA is, I'm not sure where they stand on it. I've heard WDFW has and or is making concessions for those that can provide accurate or adequate information to say, I am disabled, I can only fish from a boat, and they're making accommodations. Now, how factual that is, I have yet to hear. I'm more curious to see what comes out of the commission meeting tomorrow afternoon, to see if they readdress the current standards or the current rules that have been handed down by WDFW, and see if there's going to be any alter of specifically the non-fishing from a floating device. I think that's the one that's hanging out there. If there's going to be any change to this plan, it would be in regards to that. And would it be a month or two accessing the hatchery fish, and then they have a stop date on it? I don't know. Just to be perfectly clear, it's all speculation. There was a statement made addressing it on the 18th. There is a meeting, in fact, a meeting tomorrow. Again, we'll see if that goes anywhere, or if it's not discussed tomorrow, it's a done deal. We're going to move forward with the season as it's been handed to us, and that's kind of where it's at. So, moving forward, as we get into 2021, we're going to bring a lot of folks in studio here, hopefully, as we get past this RONA deal, and really start tackling what it is with these conservation groups, like-minded folks who have variances in goals and ideals on how to bring our salmon and steelhead recoveries or runs back. I want to get these folks in and have those discussions, and what we as recreational anglers in the community can do to assist and help bolster those returns. How we can begin to educate folks and move down the road of hatchery programs, good hatchery programs with brood stock hatchery programs in place, okay? Not the hatchery programs that have been dismal in creating so many problems for the past 30, 40, 50 years. We're talking about new age type fish recovery. Broodstock programs that have been proven for 20, 30 plus years down in Oregon, okay, especially as it relates to steelhead. So there's a lot of ground to tackle here moving forward, and you guys have heard us previously a lot talk on behalf of the success of broodstock programs and how we want to start moving that direction. So we're going to bring in the players. We'll bring in the folks from different organized groups. Hatchery and Wild coexist for sure. We'll have discussions with CCA and what their vision is and how to recover. We'll talk with hopefully get Ron Garner in here, president of PSA. We'll touch base again with NSIA. We got all these collective groups, collective minds, different goals, different paths. Time to unite and bring it together is going to be one of the goals of Fish Hunt Northwest as we move through 2021. So look for more information to come on that, and as we move into 2021. Hey, quick reminder: sportsman shows are slated for March. They've bumped it completely out of January, February time frames. We had mentioned it last week. The emails had come out, and there's information floating around out there now from the O'Laughlin Group, who puts on and provides the sportsman shows throughout the Northwest. The two that most folks are leaning on would be the Puyallup Sportsman Show, which typically happens in January, and the Portland Show, which is just outside of Portland, which typically happens then a few weeks later in February. So both those have been scratched. The sportsman shows, as we know them, are scheduled for March 17th through the 21st in Puyallup, and March 24th through 28th in Portland at the Expo Hall, the Northwest Sportsman Show down there at the Expo Hall. So as things continue to track, and hopefully as we turn the corner here after the first of the year, we'll see. Maybe we get into February and the numbers begin to go down. Governor Inslee has stated he has benchmarks of certain criteria within populations of 100,000, 50 cases to allow schools to reopen. So they're starting to unveil some benchmarks that they want to see the communities hit. Don't get me going on where I stand on this whole Rona deal. That's where you don't even have time to entertain that. There's a lot of frustration out there. There's a lot of sympathy, empathy for small business, a lot of folks going out of business. It's very sad. But as we move into 2021, we're hoping we can turn that corner and start to reunite as communities, get businesses back up and going, save persons, small businesses, and look forward to perhaps in March, it might be a pipe dream, but hopefully in March we're back together at these sportsman shows. I know Fish Hunt Northwest, we'd love to be able to provide our booth down there at the Puyallup show in March, and come out, see y'all, and sell our wares and be able to function as per normal. So we'll see what that looks like. I mean, we're obviously not holding our breath, but we're intrigued that they're even considering hopefully having the sportsman shows as we move forward. Okay, tonight's show, as we get into it here, I took some time reading emails and questions, and persons are constantly messaging us on ideas with some how-tos. Believe it or not, I've had a lot of messages as of late on certain knots. Now, a lot of you who have been fishing for years have your types of knots that you rely on, and that's great. Sometimes we need to take time to back it up a few steps, break it down to the granular details on exactly how to tie certain knots. One of the big ones folks constantly are asking, believe it or not, is how do you secure monofilament top shot to braid? Oftentimes when we're talking about float fishing, various types of float fishing, albeit vertical or bobber dogging, and we're securing that top shot to our braid, or when we're securing top shot to braid, albeit it might only be 6 feet or so when I'm fishing plugs, or you want to put on that 30-foot section of 50-pound mono on your braid out there when we're fishing the salt because our downrigger clips don't hold on to the braid real well. There's various times that we find ourselves attaching that monofilament to braid. There's a certain knot that I've kind of utilized. I somewhat made it up years ago, tried all different types of knots, finally kind of took a couple different ideas together, created a knot that I've been using for a very long time with great success. So I've put together, for the bait lab tonight, we're going to show how to secure that monofilament to braid as your top shot. And we're going to work it on right down the line. I'm going to tie a dual rig setup. For some of those rivers in Washington, we can still fish a dual rig. I felt it was applicable to go ahead because the questions also come in, how do you secure that dropper bead on the bottom of your jig and not make my jig, fish funky, as it hangs in the wrong orientation. Or if I want to fish a small piece of bait under a jig a couple feet below, how do I put that second hook on there so it doesn't cause my jig to, go basically vertical and not fish horizontal or perpendicular to my line? So I thought it would be appropriate, as we're getting into steelhead season, to go ahead and just go through that progression, okay? It's a two-part, it'll be a two-part in the bait lab because of the number of knots and components we're adding, but hey, we don't have a lot of other stuff to talk about tonight, so we're gonna go through a complete rig up of top shot onto braid. We're gonna also show how to attach the weight inline sinker, how to put your float on there to where you can run it either fixed or sliding. We'll put the inline sinker, we'll add the jig, we'll add the dropper bead, we'll do the whole thing. We're gonna do that tonight. Before we get there though, because of the recent rulings of WDFW and the approach we need to take to steelhead season, thereby we are not fishing from boats, we are not covering ground and dragging presentations behind us or bobbers out in front of us. We are basically getting out on the gravel bar, and you can bobber dog quasi float drift, as I like to call it. You can throw spinners, you can toss spoons, you can bobber and jig fish, you can do all that stuff standing from the bank. You can also drift fish, okay? Kind of a lost art, one that some of you have never picked up or decided to do at all. And we've had a handful of questions after this ruling. Hey, what can you show us about drift fishing? Curious about it and would like some more insight. I did a great breakdown of drift fishing A to Z last year during steelhead season. Instead of rehashing all that, because I covered so much ground, I went ahead, I'm going to spool that up tonight as a replay, but the information is still pertinent. It's a great look at in a breakdown of drift fishing from A to Z. I'm going to walk you through a lot of different options that you need to consider when you are drift fishing for steelhead specifically, and what that looks like, okay? So tonight's show is basically comprised of time in the bait lab. We're gonna start off with drift fishing for steelhead, two-part presentation. I'll come back from that. We'll do an in bait lab tonight on basically all the knots we're gonna cover, starting with that top shot of monofilament onto the braid, and we'll walk you through the whole progression. And so basically, sit back, relax, grab a beverage, and enjoy a handful of tips and tricks on how-tos tonight from the bait lab on Fish Hunt Northwest. Okay, with that, we're gonna jump out for a quick break. We come back, drift fishing, two-part series in the bait lab right here on Fish Hunt Northwest.
Defiance Marine is the one-stop shop for the Pacific Northwest angler. Whether you are looking for a small skiff to fish the Sound or rivers, or a huge offshore tuna machine, Defiance Marine has it. At Defiance Marine, be sure to power your boat with a Honda outboard package. Take advantage of the reliability and 5-year top-to-prop warranty on your Honda outboards. Our service department is always here to help and serve you as the customer. Did you know Defiance Marine has boat financing experts to help get you the best term rates on your new boat purchase? If you need financing for that new boat, call us today. We guarantee the best price, best service on a repower for your current boat. Defiance Marine is a Honda Premier dealership and one of the largest on the West Coast. Defiance Marine also carries all the gear that you will need. Everything from auxiliary kicker motors to fishing tackle and bait. Defiance Marine has certified technicians that are top-notch at their job. Some of the best in the Pacific Northwest at evaluating your boat issues and problems. Stop in today or give us a call for all your needs at Defiance Marine.
tonight, in all truthfulness, we are going to talk about drift fishing. And it's funny, every time nowadays you mention drift fishing, folks go, oh yeah, you're flossing, or you're just, yeah, you're dragging long leaders or whatever it is. That is not typically the history of drift fishing. So it all started out drift fishing, believe it or not. If you were a bank fisherman back in the day, you were a drift fisherman, and we're talking leaders of 18 to 30 inches typically is what we're talking about. And I'm going to walk through a number of different presentations here that you can, or offerings that you can present out there as you're drift fishing with your weight, believe it or not, actually ticking along the bottom. And we're not talking about a bunch of weight that is, you know, you're throwing out there on the bottom of the river and it's starting and stopping where you got to lift your rod and get it to move and drift on through the hole. We're not talking about that. We're also not talking about using enough weight that your rod tip is constantly just bouncing like crazy, okay? We're talking about matching current speed in water that's conducive to holding steelhead, that is actually going through at natural current speed. And if you're doing it right, and we're going to show you how to do that tonight, your lead is basically tapping bottom about every 3 feet or so. About every yard, you're just coming in contact with bottom, keeping your presentation down in the strike zone. So when we talk about drift fishing, I'm going to break down these rods and show you different riggings on them. We're going to talk about different weight options that you have to figure out exactly what type or how to present your weight. But at the end of it, this is considered terminal gear, okay? You basically are offering them something that if everything goes right in this hatchery fish, it's a terminal day, so it's terminal gear. We have a number of things that we can use on this board that you can drift fish. And everything on this board that you can drift fish, you can also bobber dog. So for all you folks that are so happy with your results and how easy bobber dogging is, it actually all started with drift fishing. Back in the day, we would drift fish all this stuff long before you ever took a float stuck at 8 feet or 10 feet above this particular presentation, and it was just drifting through the drift. So if we look over here to my left, starting off, one of the old tried and trues, the YBC Spin and Glow, been around forever. Oftentimes back in the day, if I was drift fishing with Spin and Glow, I'd run a double hook setup because I'm putting a sand shrimp on there, which is a great offering for steelhead, okay? And as we let that work through the water, that's just the lead is dragging. And as you can see on this board, most of these are all rigged with stick leads because anymore, if I'm drift fishing, that's pretty much all I'm using. I'm going to walk through different leads in a little bit, but for me, it's all about the stick lead, drift fishing, matching the current speed, and presenting an offering that moves along naturally, one that doesn't constantly start and stop. Spinning glows have been used for years. Corkies is something I grew up on. A lot of folks have a chest drawer of Corkies. Here's a lot of the old ones that I have from back in the day, all various colors, all different sizes. Simply, believe it or not, back in the day, you could get steelhead on something as simple as a size 10 or 12 little Corky. This pink pearl and that sunrise combination back in the day would get it done with a single hook. No bait, no scent, no nothing. No, you're not flossing because, again, you're using about a 20-inch leader in a single Corky. And yes, fish will bite those. It's no different than nowadays when they will go after a bead. So just a different type of buoyancy, a different type of feel for them. Obviously, this is a hard surface that they would bite on. But steelhead are driven by color and color contrast for sure. And back in the day in clear water, some of these colors were hard to beat. If there was a steelhead in there, believe it or not, it wouldn't take much. If you were first line to pass through the water, a simple little Corky, a hook, and you were in business. So Corkies worked forever. They still do. They haven't gone away. You can still use them. Whether you end up setting up a double rig or fish that single. As we progress, soft plastics become pretty prevalent nowadays. You know, egg clusters that look like our old Okie drifters have become pretty popular. There's a number of manufacturers out there making soft egg clusters. You can pin those up just like you would a bead. It's a soft plastic. It's neutral buoyant. You put a hook on there. It typically, depending on size of hook, I typically couple these, if you can find them, with a size 3, believe it or not, is a great size hook to run with a soft plastic. Down here I got one of the new B&R soft beads. You know, bead fishing has become all the craze. You can actually drift fish beads and they do very well. All different sizes, B&R for me is one of the go-tos. Obviously, they have so many options, different colors. These pearl, these multicolor ones that look like that faded out, bleached out egg that is just kind of tumbling along down the river. Oranges and peaches, some of them with white accents. These all work based on water conditions. And typically a single bead of various sizes, depending on water clarity and depth, is going to get it done. Yes, they drift fish very well. A lot of folks fish them under bobbers, either bobber dogging or suspended under a float. But drift fishing works great. Believe it or not, you can also drift fish with soft plastic worms. Put that with a corky. Again, I use this setup a lot bobber dogging, but you know what? It works very well when I'm simply drift fishing. You can drift fish soft plastics. Now, one of the go-tos for years is making homemade rags. This one's a little on the large side. I use that puffier yarn. After it gets wet, I typically trim these down a little bit depending on water clarity. So I always like to make them a little bigger just in the event I'm fishing waters that are with minimal clarity. I have a nice big profile that's going to get them. Typically match that up with some egg or some shrimp in the bait loop there. Okay, going to cinch that up, pull that down. This is just made out of backer rod and multicolors of yarn. The reasons for multicolors, 2 or 3 multicolors on your rags, is because of contrast. Again, Steelhead key in on color contrast, so I want to make sure I give them a lot of colors to choose from. A little diversion from that, but still kind of the same idea, is just simply a yarny, multicolor yarny ball. They're somewhat buoyant, but you can fish those with a size 1 or a size 1/0 hook is going to do very well. These yarnies are great. They're very inexpensive to make. And by drift fishing those, they work fantastic. Now, one thing you can do when it comes to yarn, no matter if it's on a rag or a yarn ball, is by adding some of your oils. I typically use Mike's. I think it's the best in the market because of how natural they smell and how well they work. But anytime I add oil, an oil-based product to any of your yarns, and it absorbs it, not only does it add scent, it adds a tremendous amount of scent, but it also adds buoyancy. You'd be amazed at how much higher this yarn ball will float in the water column simply by adding some oil to it. So you have scent and you have additional buoyancy with your yarnies. If you're not adding scent to your yarnies, you need to start doing that. It gives them something else to key in on. You draw them with the color, they have a little scent, and again, it adds increased buoyancy. Now, one of the old standbys that we've used for years, if you grew up in the 70s and 80s fishing, is the old Okie drifter. My buddy Herzog for years was reintroducing the old theory of the Okie drifter, the original ones back in the day. That's what these are. These seldom get fished because I just want to hold on to them because they're not very easy to find. But in fact, going back to it, the Okie drifter is one that's been around for years. Back in the day, much like the corky, you could simply fish a single Okie drifter, a size 1 or 1/0 hook, and Steelhead would absolutely go after those things. And, you know, for all intents and purposes, still do today because it's been tried and true. It's something that works. Any and all of these will work because they are buoyant or neutral buoyant. Some of them have action, they have color, they have contrast. They're exactly what you want to utilize for drift fishing. So how do we get there? What is drift fishing all about? Set this down real quick. Okay, so a lot of it starts with our lead options. Okay, now for me, here is a typical drift fishing setup. I like to use a bait casting setup. I typically, from fishing the bank, I'll run a 9 to 9.5 foot rod. As you can see on here, I have a rag lure, and of course I have my stick lead. I have about a 20-inch leader. I have my main line, which, because I also use this rod for bobber fishing, I have a top shot of 20-pound monofilament tied onto my braid. Now, for years I advocated, hey, don't use braid for drift fishing. If you get hung up, you leave a lot of braid in the river. I would say that to folks that tie their braid directly to their swivel at the terminal end of their tackle. If you put on about 12 or 18 foot of monofilament top shot, you have a very small section in there with stretch capability. You also have a break off portion of your line that if it does get wrapped up into something, you have to snap that off. If you're going to leave anything in the river, it's going to be that monofilament and not the braid, which is better for the environment. So you can use braid for drift fishing, and I actually advocate that you do because it telegraphs so much better as you go through your drift. You can feel that weight touching the bottom every so often, which is exactly what you're striving for. So put that top shot on there. Run your stick lead or whatever weight choice we're going to run through here that you can choose from. You know, again, 18 to 36 inch leader. That's going to depend on the buoyancy of your presentation and the clarity of your water, okay? If you have a really buoyant lure like a rag, and I run a 36-inch leader, depending on the current I'm fishing in, that thing may float up well out of the strike zone of the fish that I'm targeting. If the water's not that high and the current's not that fast, and I got a pretty buoyant lure, I may want to shorten that leader down to about an 18 to 20-inch leader, which is only going to allow it to rise so high in the water column, keeping it in the strike zone of where the fish are at. I'm going to add my scent to that rag. I'm going to run that 1 or size 1/0 hook, and that's going to get it done as I drift fish that through the water column. Now, when you're drift fishing, here's the key to drift fishing. I'm looking out at the water and it's moving from my right to my left. I'm going to cast upriver at about a 45-degree angle. The current's going to start carrying that presentation back towards me to where it's going to at some point be straight out in front of me. As it is dropping, it begins to contact bottom about every yard or so. As that line comes sweeping through, I collect my slack in the line so I can feel that rod tip just following the bottom contour, okay? Now when I begin to put that presentation out there, I don't cast all the way across the river. I need to fish the near water to my side first. So I'm gonna throw it out upriver on the inside. You'll see where that current seam is breaking out there. And that soft water on the inside of that current seam is a very good starting point of where fish like to hold. I'm gonna toss that out there, let it drift through, collect my slack, come and I'm gonna follow the rod tip down river with my line. I'm going to follow my line down river. Now the biggest mistake a lot of folks make when they first start drift fishing is they'll get about 2/3 of the way through their drift. It'll drop off the inside of the current and next thing you know, they start reeling in. And that's the biggest mistake you can make because a lot of times as that drops in off of the current, it will lie there for a second. That's where fish are going to come over and pick it up. So you don't necessarily want to reel that in too quickly. You want to allow that to come off of the current edge, sit for just a little bit, see if a fish doesn't pick it up at the end of the drift and start giving you something to feel. Now you're going to repeat that. You're going to cast out a little further. You're going to let it swing through the drift. Again, it's going to break past the current. It's going to slow down and just kind of stop, settle in that soft water, leave it sit. You've casted further. It actually pendulums downriver a few feet further than your previous cast. You're going to cast mid-river, okay? You're going to only cast out to the water that's moving fast as maybe that you would like to walk is what they usually reference. If it's really raging on the other side, don't even waste your time. Don't need to throw it over there. First of all, it's not going to get down to bottom because it's moving too fast with your weight. Secondly, as it gets to the tail end, it's just going to pendulum up and come out of the strike zone. So you got to kind of pick your battle. So work that stretch of water from inside to out. Take steps 10, 15 feet downriver, repeat the process. 45 up, let it swing through, let it drop off the inside of the current seam, let it sit, let those fish come and pick it up, let them come to you, and when you feel that fish pick it up and start bouncing your rod tip, you need to set the hook pretty darn aggressively. It's not like we have a float that they can take down that you can see. It's not like they're just picking it up and swimming along with it. You need to feel that fish, you need to reel down, get the slack out of the line, and give them a good pop, really bury that hook, okay? That's a typical drift fishing setup. Again, I like a 9.5 foot rod. 6 to 15 for me gets it done all day long. One of my favorite line weights of rods to fish steelhead. So, some other options we have.
Sportco, an outdoor emporium, is the largest local outfitter in the Northwest since 1975, providing thousands of people affordable outdoor gear. This summer, make your next outdoor adventure more affordable by shopping at our warehouse-style pricing. We are a local Scotty dealer, offering sales, service, and repair. Located in Fife and Seattle, come visit us today. The outdoors await you.
It's easier than ever to browse homes and connect with an agent on the go with Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate's mobile app. With the app, your home search is synced across all of your devices, so you can pick up your home search anytime, anywhere. Take full advantage of an enriched, mobile-optimized map search experience. Use location services to quickly find homes near you that match your search criteria. Draw your own map boundaries to find homes in a specific area, and apply layers to view school districts, neighborhoods, zip codes, and more. The app's user-friendly design makes it easier than ever to find a home you'll love. Narrow down your search results, save your search criteria, and save your favorite homes. You can browse your saved homes in a list view that puts photos and key details like price and square footage right at your fingertips. Or check out your saved homes displayed on the map.
If you are in a drift boat or a sled and you're fishing with a guide or somebody is talking to you about how to present this offering 45 degrees out the back of the boat, this is side drifting. Side drifting is not to be confused with drift fishing. Side drifting typically employs about a 6, 7, sometimes 8 foot leader. Oftentimes they run a little dual hook setup with a small cheater or something. You put some bait in the bait loop. I have a single piece of lead out there. I'm actually going to cast this. Now the biggest difference here is I'm not standing idle on the bank. I'm in a boat that's moving. So as I throw this, at a 45 behind us and we're moving down river, we're literally just dragging this down through the holes. We're just letting that lead tap every so often. It's a technique, it's a method. It's, for whatever reason, there's many that are convinced that a longer leader for side drifting works better. I've spent years side drifting with 3 foot leaders and have caught plenty of fish. I have never bought into the theory that we need 6 foot leaders. I have fished them with other folks in boats and I'm okay, that's what we're doing, great. I think you can side drift and do just fine with 3 foot leaders, but what do I know? So side drifting is a different technique. It's not to be confused with drift fishing. Now, that being said, side drifting is not what you're doing if you're standing on the bank fishing a 6 or 8 foot leader. You are flossing. There's a difference, right, Bo? So there is drift fishing, which we're talking about tonight. There is side drifting, which is a technique that's been used in Washington State and in the Northwest for years. Very productive when in a boat moving with the current, matching current speed, dragging multiple baits and presentations through the hole, longer leader, whatever. That is side drifting. If you're standing at the bank and you're casting out 6 and 8 foot leaders with a small little cheater or floaty device and an oversized hook or a little piece of yarn and a hook, you are flossing. You are not drift fishing. If you have anything longer than a 30-inch leader, 36-inch leader for whatever reason, and you're fishing the bank, you are not drift fishing, you are flossing. I just want to be clear on that. So it's a technique that's proven, and if that's how you fish, great. I'm just trying to dispel the rumors and the misinformation, the difference between drift fishing, side drifting, and flossing, because there is a difference, okay? Let's talk about a few different options for weight. Now, one thing to consider too is, as I mentioned before, anything you can bob or dog, you can drift fish. And this particular rod is set up, believe it or not, it has 2 presentations on here, okay? I have my main presentation, which I would put a little piece of bait on there, and that's gonna work great. And I also drag along this little tiny fly egg, single egg offering that's about 18 or 20 inches behind my main offering. There's nothing wrong with fishing dual rigs. Fly guys have done it for years. Sometimes they fish 2 or 3 rigs, it all works. Sometimes when drift fishing, you can get away with that. If you can cast it and not get it tangled up, you can do a double offering. Some different options for weight. Now for me, there really is no other option. I'm going to fish stick leads all day long, but for some of you guys, you like to do different things, okay? And that's fine. One thing we can do is we can simply tie on to our barrel swivel a little extra piece or tag line, the piece on there. We take our pliers and we take our hollow core lead and we're just going to cut a little piece off of here with the pliers that make it so you don't press or clamp shut that piece of hollow core. And we'll see if we can get this in here, if my eyes will work tonight. So one method is to simply put this little piece of line on here, and then I push through this piece of leader, okay? Now I have that on there, and all I have to do is crimp that on, okay? Now the thing about drift fishing is, more times than not, and with stick leads I don't really have to worry about it because typically they don't get hung up that much. So if you're not getting hung up, it's not an issue. If you're fishing weights that tend to get hung up, you want to have a release mechanism. because drift fishing, your weight is contacting bottom. So by putting this on here with a hollow core and a little piece of line sticking off there, if that gets hung up, no big deal, because all you got to do is pull hard, and that's going to end up sliding off that line, and you can get your presentation back. So 1/8 inch hollow core with a piece of leader on there works great in that regard. All right. Some other options that we can talk about. Get back to my main drift fishing rod here. So I have a crane swivel on here, which is nothing more than a barrel swivel with a lock. Let me pull that out. So that's why these stick leads work so great, because they have an eye at each end and I can hang them in there. They're going to fish all day long. You seldom lose them. They work great. If I don't want to do that, back in the day, we used to take solid core lead with a piece of surgical tubing, and another way of doing this is simply to punch this through. See if I can do that, but probably not on that. There we go. On this swivel, now I put that piece of surgical tubing and I just simply press that lead into that surgical tubing. Now, when that gets hung up, okay, and that's pulling on there, more times than not, when that lead's in the rocks, it's just going to pop out. Now you reel that in, you haven't lost your leader and all your gear. You just simply cut off another piece and put that in. Works fantastic, has worked for years. I typically don't use the surgical tubing anymore because I've gone to stick leads. Another option, of course, is slinkies. You can build them yourself. You just take shot, you take a parachute cord and a lighter and some pliers, you put the shot in the cord, and you have yourself a slinky. These also work very well. They get hung up far less than solid lead does for whatever reason. They don't weigh as much. If you have a piece that's the same length as lead, it's not going to weigh as much, so you may have to run a longer piece, but that's nothing more than lead shot in the parachute cord, and you can simply, work that through on your swivel and connect that too, and then that is also a mechanism for weighting. Of course, this won't pull out or release in any way, shape, or form, so if you get hung up, it's probably going to break. The other option is to take hollow core lead, okay, and cut a piece off, much like these here, and you take your punch pliers. For a lot of you that don't know, that's what that punch is for, and you're just going to set that over here and squeeze it down and basically punch a hole in there. All right, so now, oops, missed it. Cut that off, do it again. So I'm going to punch that lead. Okay, so now I got a nice hole that I put in there. I usually like to pinch these a little thinner, just so that I have that tearing point. That's what all these lead pieces are for and why they have holes in them, because you punch that lead. Now I'm going to hang that on the swivel, close that up. Now this one gets hung up. It actually works pretty well. That'll actually tear through that thin piece of that lead. It's a great way to do it. Again, I don't mess with any of this stuff. I pretty much just resolve to use my stick leads when it comes to drift fishing, because they work so well. A 6-inch stick lead is going to weigh about 0.47 and 0.48, just under a ½ ounce. And you have sizes that vary from 5-inch down to 4, 3, and 2. Pretty much you can quick change them out because they have eyelets at each side. And they just give you a really nice natural drift. If you're drift fishing and haven't used the stick leads, give those a try, because it's really going to up your game as far as sensation, feel, and how natural they match current speed. You can use any weighting system you want for your leads when drift fishing, but for me, it's all about the stick lead. It's all about vibrant colors and presentation. Yarnies are a great go-to. Can't dismiss the fact how well bait works when presented drift fishing. And remember, at the end of your drift, always allow that presentation to sit, ever be so slightly, at the inside seam on the end of that drift, and wait for those steelhead to come pick them up. Allied boats are built by West Coast fishermen for West Coast fishermen. Deep V 21-degree dead rise at the transom guarantees a smooth ride no matter the conditions. Allied offers all of our boats with Honda outboard packages so that you can take full advantage of the reliability and 5-year top-to-prop warranty from your Honda outboard.
Allied boats range from 19 to 32 foot in length, so no matter what type of heavy gauge boat you are looking for, we have it for you. All of our Corsair 21 foot and larger designs come standard with reverse chine that is welded inside and out with no extrusions below the waterline, so that you will never have to worry about corrosion problems down the road. Get out on the water today in a boat that you can trust and enjoy with Allied Boats. Contact us at Allied Boats today to learn much more about our incredible fishing machines.
What if there was a smarter way to search for your new home? Introducing the Better Homes and Gardens real estate website and mobile app. This revolutionary new search tool puts your needs first. Narrow your search to what matters most to your family, like school data, school districts, and even walk scores. Get easy access to your local affiliated agent, as well as unique and local insights about neighborhoods and properties directly within the app. With synced and saved preferences, you'll always pick up wherever you left off. Get your smarter search started today with Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate.
Hey, welcome back to Fish on Northwest. We are here in the bait lab for this week's how-to. Want to remind everybody that our how-tos, weekly how-tos, are brought to you by Max Lure. Check out everything Max Lure has going on at maxlure.com. And with that, something a little different this week. We get a lot of messages and inquiries about certain types of knots that we like to use when we're fishing. One of the more common questions is, how do you secure your top shot of monofilament to your braid when you're float fishing? Now, for some, you like to run your braid right down to, say, your weight that goes then to your terminal end via your leader. You'll run your float sliding up and down your braid, and there's nothing wrong with that. I often choose, more times than not, pretty much all types of float fishing I do, whether it's vertical presentation or bobber dogging, float drifting, what have you. I will run my float on an actual top shot of monofilament. So that connection point where you secure your braid to your monofilament is kind of crucial, because for some, not utilizing the proper knot can make for a stress point or an easy break point. So there are several different knots out there to utilize. This is one that I kind of came up with several years ago, just trying different things and strength testing multiple types of knot that I would tie. I can't really find this in a book anywhere. It's just something I started doing, and I like the results. To date, I have yet to ever lose a fish because my knot failed where I secure my monofilament top shot to my braid. So I'm going to show you that one right now. So I got a 40-pound braid on my steelhead rod. It is steelhead season, so we're basically going to walk through securing the top shot to the braid, and then I'm going to go ahead and just rig up all this gear we see on the table here in front of me. It's basically going to be a vertical float setup where it's permissible this year to run a double rig, because at times you'll want to run a double rig. We're going to take and put on this 1/8 ounce jig. We got a 1/2 ounce float. We're going to drop a dropper soft plastic bead underneath this jig. And folks often ask, how do you secure all that together? What knots are you using for your inline weight? What knot do you use to secure your jig to your leader? And of course, what and how do you put a dropper? A lot of folks want to know, how do we put a dropper under a jig using a bead as a secondary attractant? So first things first, let's do the braid to monofilament first. So I basically take my braid, okay, and securing braid to mono, single strand to single strand, is going to be a failure. If nothing else, some of the knots that you use to secure that will simply pull away and pull out and come apart. So the first thing I do is I double up my braid, okay? And the working end of this is going to be the loop end, which is a little different from a lot of knots that you tie. Now I'm going to take this 15-pound mono and I'm just simply laying it over the top of each other. And this is a series of wraps. It's pretty simple, really. You take your double end of your braid and we are going to go over and under 4 times, making 4 small loops. So there's under and over is 1, under and over is 2, and you try to keep them uniform. Under and over is 3, then under and over is 4. Now we're simply going to take that double end, come up through the bottom like here, and don't just pull that tight now. You want to elongate this knot out. You want to get those loops all laid out flat, nice and symmetrical, okay? So as you see, this tail end doesn't have a whole lot left on there. I have those 4 loops light in there. Very uniformity. Now I'm going to turn this around because I'm right-handed, and I'm taking my monofilament and I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to go 4 loops. We're going under and over, second time, under and over 3, stacking the loops, under and over 4, okay? Make sure both of your braid ends are out of the way. Bring that under through the bottom. Again, elongate it out. Make sure all those lay nice and flat. Now when you go to pull this together, don't try to hold on to both pieces of this braid and pull this. It doesn't like to slide very easily. So I simply grab the leader end and I drop the tail end, and first thing I do is I slide that down almost all the way. Then I'll come back and grab this tail end and I will pull on that one. And then I come back to the main and then back to the tail end, okay? And once those are bumped up against each other and we're almost bumped up nice and tight right at that knot, now you can grab the main line of that braid and the tail in your main leader end or your top shot end, and you pull those tight. Now, just to make sure, you want to secure all 6 points. We're going to take our plier and we're going to grab this and so it doesn't slip. Again, pulling against the braid only. Okay, so I put a little twist on there and come back, grab the tail of monofilament and pull that one. Now, once I get all this stuff cut off of here, you're going to see this is nice and clean. So we're going to remove that monofilament tail. Okay, that one's out of the way. We are going to remove this extra piece of braid, that long tail off of there. And you don't have to worry about cutting these short right up to the knot. This knot is not going to pull out. It's not going to slip on itself. So you can cut these tag ends nice and tight, because if you leave them too long, they get frayed, and then it begins to have a little tougher time getting through your guides, okay? Once that's all trimmed, it's a fairly compressed knot. And for me, that knot is extremely strong. I've had very little to no issues with that knot over, I don't know, the past 8 or 10 years. So pretty simple clinch knot, cinch knot, whatever you want to call it. Now I'm going to just pick this up and collect all this extra line real quick, just so we can get to the end and finish tying our rig on. So we got our top shot on, okay? And we go from 40-pound braid to 15-pound top shot. And this is what our float is going to run on. This is going to be where my fixed float is affixed to, or I can rig it as a slider. But typically when I'm fishing jigs, I like to fix it at a certain depth and leave it there so it's not sliding up and down when I'm presenting that jig in the water. I'm going to show you how to do that with a double bobber stop here coming up. So speaking of which, first thing that goes on, of course, is our bobber stop. And I take my Bomac rubber egg stop and I'm just going to put that through the loop and slide that onto the top shot, okay? And we're gonna run that up a little ways. Now, especially when I'm fishing vertical presentation, I like to put something on top of my float so I know when it maxes out. I always will put some type of a corky or a cheater or a fish pill or something of opposing color, contrasting color out in front of that float. Put that down there so you can see it. So I like to have something in contrast that you can definitely see what's going on, okay? So we're gonna slide this up. We're gonna slide the float on here. This is a 1/2 ounce float. I'm gonna rig it for vertical presentation, and I'm gonna fish an 1/8 ounce jig with that and a dropper bead. I have a 1/4 ounce inline sinker that we'll be securing onto here. So next thing that goes on is this small 6mm bead underneath my float that stops against the swivel and or my secondary bobber stop. Okay, I like to put one down here underneath. This one here goes on as a means of two things. Let me pop that on there. And here's the deal. So I put that secondary one down below. When I tie my weight on, this can sit right down at the bottom. And if I'm fishing a sliding float, it'll go up and down and travel between the two stops as deep as I allow it to based on that distance. If I break off my leader or break off my weight or something, I'm not going to lose my float because this secondary bobber stop will allow everything to stay above it. And so I may end up losing the weight, I may end up losing the jig. That's okay. At least I'm not losing everything that I put on there simply by putting that secondary little bobber stop on there. The other thing it does, and it'll make more sense once I have all the weight and everything on, if I want to fix this float to a certain position on the line, I can basically pinch it in between those two bobber stops and those beads, and that is not going anywhere, okay? That is how I rig that to fix it. Now, if I want to fish a sliding float, I simply drop that lower one back down right on top of the weight. Now that float has the ability to travel, okay? And I'll show you that again here in a little bit. Anyway, got the float on, got my indicator on, got my bead, got my second stop. Now we're going to simply tie on our quarter ounce weight. And basically this is, I've always used this knot. For me, it's a strong knot. It's very simple. Very similar, same to the joining the two lines together, the monofilament and the braid, because now all I'm doing is making 4 loops. I passed it through the eye of the swivel twice, and now I'm making 4 loops, okay? Same basic principle. I use this knot a lot, and you're gonna see I pretty much use it throughout most of this rigging. We use it in our top shot, tying it together. We're using it now to secure our weight to our top shot. Same exact knot, 4 loops, come up through the bottom. Now I'm gonna push this down on top of here, and that's where that stops now. So again, if I wanted to rig this and I'm fishing a jig vertically and I set that top stop right there, this allows my float to travel, okay? Now I have adjustability and travel. If I want to make that a fixed float, I now slide that lower stop up there. Now this float is sitting there at any depth that I want to set it. We're going to put a leader underneath that weight, which is going to give it more depth, and then we're going to also put on that soft bead. Okay, so we'll slide this back down. Now we're going to tie in our jig.
A Northwest favorite for almost 40 years, Arima boats are manufactured with pride right here in Bremerton, Washington. Arima Boats offers all of our boats with Honda outboard packages so that you can take full advantage of the reliability and 5-year top-to-prop warranty from your Honda outboard. With literally thousands of Arima boats on the water throughout the Pacific Northwest, Arima boats are a proven hull design that offers incredible fuel economy and all of the amenities that a serious angler is looking for. All Arima boats are built without any structural wood materials. That is why we back our boats with a lifetime warranty. All of our Arima boats are designed to maximize deck space while also providing ample seating. Contact us today at Arima Boats for all your boating needs and let us help you get out on the water.
So basically now we're just going to tie that same 4-loop knot. We have 2 eyelets here. I got an eye on the top of my jig, swivel underneath the weight, and I'm essentially just going to do that same exact knot that I did before. Very, very simple, easy to do. So we go through the swivel once, go through the swivel twice. Make sure you always go through your swivels and similar types of gear twice, because you got to have that bumper. You can't do a single strand. It's too much pressure on a single bend in your line. So you do it twice. It gives it that extra insurance and helps disperse the load. Okay, we elongate that out again and cinch that down. Okay, don't use your teeth, use your pliers. So we tighten that up. Okay, now we're basically on the lead. Okay, now that I have my leader secured to my weight, I'm going to go ahead and tie my jig on. But before I do that, because it kind of gets in the way if it's already secured to the jig when I want to put on that dropper. So I like to tie the dropper onto the jig first, and then I'll go ahead and secure my jig to my leader piece underneath my weight. So first, let's tie a hook. And a lot of you ask questions, send in questions, you know, what type of hook knot is appropriate? Let me tell you, I for the most part, always tie similar, same style of hook, doesn't matter. The number of wraps I put on the hook either increases the ability for a bait loop, or I can restrict it down a little and not necessarily rely on a bait loop in my hook tie. This one I will tie, even though we're going to put a bead on it, I'm going to tie it so that you can see the more wraps you put on, the bigger or larger your bait loop can be for those instances where you are fishing bait. Here we're going to put a bead on, so it really doesn't matter. So first thing I do is figure out the length of my leader, of course. Then I'm simply going to go through the eye of the hook, and we're going to put a series of multi-wraps on here. The most important one, the very first wrap, must get down in the corner of the eye of your hook, where it goes back against the shank, okay? The reason for that is I wrap that in there and secure it up tight to the very top. That is my bumper that protects the leader basically from when it pulls tight under a fish grabbing it. I don't have this shock factor in slippage of where it's going to get in there, bind, and potentially break off. So that first one goes up in there tight. Now we're going to make a series of wraps, all symmetrical. And again, I could stop right here, 5 or 6 or 8 wraps. And if I secure that through and put the bottom wraps on, I have a very small bait loop. If I just add extra wraps in here, when I'm fishing eggs under a bobber, for example, I'll put a good 13, 14 top wraps on there to elongate out that bait loop. It just makes it easier to grab when I want to put bait in the loop. So put your running end back through the eye. Don't drag it all the way through, because you just have to work around it. So nice and short. We put that down against the shank, and we're going to put about 3, 4, 5 wraps underneath that just to secure it in place. And again, this is fluorocarbon. You can wet it if you want to. I just make sure I don't pinch it real tight when I drag this through, and it slides through relatively easy, doesn't drag against itself, and certainly doesn't mar it up to where it gives any weak points or creates any heat. If you press that, if you hold that real tight on your wraps as you're dragging that line through there, you create heat and friction, and that's what can damage your fluorocarbon. So as long as you don't cinch it up too tight and drag that through too fast, you're not going to create heat. You're not going to weaken your fluorocarbon. So no worries there. Okay, we're going to cut that tail end off. Now I have my hook ready to go, and we're going to rig it for a bead. Now these bead stops, little T rubber ends are fantastic. I recommend using those for your soft beads. They work really, really well, and they're very easy to put on. Simply put the leader through the eye of the wire, and we're going to drag this T-stopper on there and slide it down into place. Just that simple, okay? So there we have that in place now. Come back, grab the end of our leader, put our 12 millimeter bead on here. It's already got a pre-manufactured hole in the bead, so I don't need a needle or anything like that. We're just going to slide this on down to the T-stop and pop it in there, okay? Now, that's basically ready to fish. If I wanted to bobber dog it or fish it in any fashion, even if I wanted to fish that in a vertical presentation under a float, which it will basically do just hanging underneath a jig. So either or, the same, it all works. Now we're just going to show how to secure this leader onto this jig, because the jig is designed to have a leader coming from the top of it through the eye, so the jig fishes horizontal, okay? If I tie extra rigging to the back side of this hook, it tends to take your jigs and they'll fish more vertical in the water column than they will horizontal, okay? Fish will still hit them when they're like that, but the bottom line is jigs are designed to be fished horizontal, perpendicular to your leader. So we want to try to keep them in that orientation. So if I'm going to hang anything underneath my jig, an extra leader with a piece of bait or a bead, for example, or even a micro jig, sometimes you want to fish a 1/32 ounce little micro jig under your main jig. That has worked for years. You want to somehow secure this towards the head of the jig, but not compromise your ability to hook it, connect it to your leader. So there's a real simple way to do that, and it's basically using that same multi-wrap knot that I use for most of my rigging, okay? So right here at the head of the jig, I'm gonna lay this in here. We're gonna wrap it twice. Again, you gotta ensure that bumper. So we wrap just behind the head of the jig twice, okay? And secure that line in there nice and tight. And now I have the working end and the running end. So again, we're gonna make 4 loops. Just make sure I orient it just right so that I'm going under and over on my wrap. So there we go under, and here we go over. Pinch that between the fingers. Get the first one, the rest of them will go pretty easy, okay? Stack it in there. There's 2. Here's the third, okay? And the 4th one. 4 wraps stacked in there. Now again, we're going to take this, come up through the bottom, just like so. Pull this out. Remember, elongate the knot. Don't just cinch it down on itself. Elongate it. Make sure you don't put it down too tight, because again, this is fluorocarbon. So you just want to work this back and forth till it cinches up nice and tight. Pull this tail in, secure that. Okay, come in here with your scissor and trim this off nice and tight. Make sure you cut the right one, obviously. Okay, so we secure that. There we go. That's on there nice and tight. It's towards the head of the jig. It's double wrapped around the shank of the hook behind the jig head. It's at a very strong point. That knot doesn't put excess pressure on that line when it's under pressure from a fish. Okay, I've caught many fish that way. Doesn't ever seem to want to break right there. So now when I secure this to my leader, that bead will hang under that jig in a vertical fashion, and the jig will sit in the water column perpendicular, okay? Exactly as it should. Now let's grab our leader end real quick, just to complete this entire presentation. Now that the bead is secured underneath it, I can go ahead and secure this jig to my leader, to my overall presentation, because I get that in there, because it's not in the way. And again, 4 loops, under, over, went through the jig again twice to put that bumper in there, okay? So there is 4, run that through. And again, elongate, slide it down before you make it too tight. Don't heat up your fluorocarbon. Cinch this side as well, and snip that off. Okay, now that everything's in line, let's see what that looks like hanging vertically. So here's our float. Got our depth indicator to know that our float has maxed out against our stopper. Let's go ahead and make this float fixed by sliding up that bottom bobber stop. So now my float is pinned at a depth that I preset. 1/2 ounce float, 1/4 ounce inline sinker to my leader, okay, to my 1/8 ounce jig, and to my, basically to my dropper bead underneath that jig, okay? So when it's fishing, it's all going through the water column. I'll slide this down here so we can see it. It's all pretty much just traveling through the water column, just like that. Okay, so there you have it. That pretty much covers everything from securing the top shot to your braid via that same multi-wrap 4-loop knot, all the way down to securing this bead underneath our jig. Similar same knot throughout the entire presentation, albeit the obviously the hook wrap is somewhat different. That'll pretty much do it for us here in the Bait Lab. Got any questions or comments, make sure to hit us up on our Facebook page, Fish Hunt Northwest, and or go to our webpage, fishhuntnw.com. Leave us comments or questions there. I'm actually going to put this all into a blog for your reading pleasure, so that'll all be spelled out in a blog soon to come, to fishhuntnw.com. And check out our online store just in time for Christmas. Get all your goods and wares via our webpage, and check out all the blogs and information we got going on there as well. All right, we're going to jump out for a quick break. We come back, we'll be back in studio, close out the show. Defiance boats are built without any structural wood materials. That is why we back our boats with a lifetime warranty. All of our Defiance boats come standard with large fish boxes that are fully insulated so that you can ice your fish properly all day. Defiance boats feature a 21 to 22 degree dead rise at the transom and a large reverse chine for incredible handling and stability offshore. Defiance boats are foam flotation filled and unsinkable for the ultimate in safety while fishing offshore. Defiance boats feature fuel efficient hull designs with large fuel tank capacity so that you can have maximum fuel range for making long offshore runs completely safe and affordable. All Defiance boats come standard with self-bailing decks for improved safety while at sea. Defiance Boat offers all our boats with Honda outboard packages so that you can take full advantage of the reliability and 5-year top-to-prop warranty from your Honda outboard. Defiance Boats for all your boating needs, and let us help you get out on the water. Well, there you go. That is pretty much the gist of it. A show mostly comprised of how-tos in the Bait Lab this evening. Hey, I'm by myself. It's kind of the best I could do in this time frame. So we're going to close it out here. Hopefully you learned something from both the drift fishing that I did actually do last year, but felt it was worth reviewing tonight. And of course, the knot tying. Hopefully you took something away from there. If you have questions on any of that information that was provided tonight, hit us up here on Facebook via Messenger. Hit us up with questions via email at www.fishhuntnw.com. We're always available. We try to answer any and all the questions and comments that we get continuously from you all who support our show. So I want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We will reconvene here in the studio January 7th, 2021 will be our first show as we roll into the new year. Lots to look forward to. So get on out there, get some waterfowl hunting in, as we will over the next couple weeks. Get some steelhead fishing in, as we will also be doing that over the next couple weeks. And share your accomplishments, fails, and/or successes on our Facebook page. We love to post those pictures out there, especially with the kids and the successes throughout the holiday season. So with that, we're going to close it out. Appreciate you joining me here this evening. Tommy and Josh will be back with me after the first of the year. The whole Fish Hunt Northwest team will reconvene. Looking forward to 2021. Be safe. Again, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We'll see you out there very soon.